I'd also like to introduce you to Mr. Marco van der Rie, please.
Very nice to meet you, Mr. Balen. Looking forward to hear your views from the presidency on the work on the SDGs that's being done in Nigeria. Very excited. I'm Marco van der Rie with GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative on Sustainability Reporting for companies worldwide, based in Amsterdam. Working from home though, we're still with the pandemic.
Pleasure. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm pleased to meet you again. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
And Marco, we're pleased to meet you, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Nice to meet you. And unfortunately, we have to do these events now all online. Although it seems to be also a good way of actually still connecting people across the globe without too much effort and travel. So it's good we can do this like this. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Dr. Andrew Venter, I'd like to introduce you too, please. To Dr. Bala Yunusa, please.
Good afternoon. Lovely to meet you. Real privilege to be here. So I am the Regional Director for the University of Cambridge's Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And really looking forward to this afternoon session, learning a lot more about, I'm sure, some amazing initiatives happening in the Nigerian environment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. The pleasure is ours. We're happy to have you here too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for sparing time for us. We appreciate you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we just a little countdown. I think we literally have a minute or two. And while people still log on, I think we'll be directed as to when we'll be going live in a few moments. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Titi. I make it 2:02.
Yes, I think it's a good time for us to start since the introductions are done.
Absolutely. So, are we live?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we are live.
Okay.
Okay.
So, good morning. Good morning, or do I say good afternoon to everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. And we still have a few people logging on, but we'll continue as we did state that we'll be starting it promptly at 2. So thank you all. Thank you all for joining us today for our sustainability webinar. A Decade for Action, Accelerating the SDGs in a Post-Pandemic Era, with the focus on today's topic, environmental and social governance, a transformative approach towards achieving the SDGs. Before we introduce our keynote speaker, our chairman, and our thought leaders, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping, please. Today's webinar is being recorded. We'll be able to share a link with you afterwards. We also would like to invite you to type out your comments. You'll see a Q&A box at the bottom. So if you think of any questions for our speakers at any point, please do not hesitate to share them and state them there, please. We are delighted to have the following distinguished individuals in our midst today. Our chairman of Lafarge Africa PLC, Mr. Adebode Adefioye. You're most welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Folashade. And thank you for putting this together.
Thank you very much, sir. Her Excellency Princess Adejoke Orelope Adefulure, ably represented by Dr. Bala Yusuf Yunusa, the Technical Advisor for SDGs. You're most welcome, Dr. Bala.
Thank you very much, Folashade.
Mrs. Bola Adeshola, United Nations Global Compact Vice Chair, Board Member and Senior Vice Chairman, Africa, Standard Chartered Bank Group. You're most welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Folashade. Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Andrew Venter, Director, Institute of Sustainability Leadership, University of Cambridge. You're most welcome, Dr. Venter.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to this afternoon's session.
Thank you. Mr. Marco van die Ree, the Chief Development Officer of the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Folashade, for the invitation, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you. And our esteemed host for the series and country CEO, Khalid El Dakani, Chief Executive Officer, Lafarge Africa PLC. You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Fola. Thank you.
Thank you. Please permit me to share just a few highlights before we hand over to our chairman to declare the webinar series open, please. A decade for action, accelerating the SDGs in a post-pandemic era. The United Nations has declared 2020 to 2030 as the decade of action. The decade of action calls for accelerating sustainable solutions to the world's biggest challenges, ranging from poverty and gender to climate change, inequality, and closing the finance gap. All sectors of society are to mobilize for a decade of action on 3 levels. 1, global action to secure greater leadership, more resources, and smarter solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals. 2, local action, embedding the needed transitions in the policies, budgets, institutions, and regulatory frameworks of governments, cities, and local authorities. And finally, 3, people action, including the youth, civil societies, the media, the private sector, unions, academia, and other stakeholders, all in all to generate an unstoppable movement pushing for required transformations. SDG acceleration actions are initiatives voluntarily undertaken to accelerate the SDG implementation by all stakeholders. In 2019, Lafarge Africa held the inaugural Sustainability Forum. That session afforded us the opportunity for discussions and indeed to forge strategic collaborations in co-processing and circular economy, specifically geared towards solving one of the world's greatest challenges, waste management. This year, the Sustainability Webinar Series with the theme, A Decade for Action, Accelerating the SDGs in a Post-Pandemic Era, aims to highlight policies, initiatives, interventions, partnerships, and opportunities with an overall objective to leverage all resources to ensure that Nigeria is deliberate about the achievements of the sustainable goals within the next 10 years. More than ever before, the global pandemic has created a shift in the way that we do things, reinforcing the need for new thinking to foster and create an enabling and sustainable environment for the achievement of set goals. We will be gaining valuable insights from formidable thought leaders from all walks of life to support the ongoing development of a national blueprint that the private and public sector, not-for-profits, and Nigeria as a nation can adopt. I'd like to invite our esteemed chairman of Lafarge Africa PLC to please declare the Sustainability Series open. Our esteemed chairman, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Folashade, and for elucidating your program so clearly. My job is simply to declare it open and to expect that the discussions will be robust. I see that it's being recorded, and the plan is also to share with everybody after, also to share with the press, And our intent is to contribute towards the upliftment, to the betterment of society. And it is with great pleasure that we are hosting you today at the Lafarge Africa Sustainability Series. It is the first of four. As an organization, Lafarge Africa's sustainability strategy is focused on 4 pillars: climate and energy, circular economy, environment, and community. In line with our organization's commitment to sustainability, economic and social governance is embedded in our operations and value chain. It is the platform on which our enterprise is built. With the impact of COVID-19 and more than before, commitment to sustainability remains absolute. Joining this conversation today is one of the ways we want to further entrench economic and social governance. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the captains of industries and thought leaders who will be partnering with us to deliver this series. My appreciation goes to our esteemed stakeholders who have joined us today, including the media. I am optimistic that this engagement and its outcome will bring immense value to us as a nation, committed to accelerating the Sustainable Development Goals. On this note, I declare the Lafarge Africa Sustainability Series open. And good afternoon in Lagos.
Thank you very much, sir. Our esteemed chairman, thank you very much. And on that note, thank you. I would like to also invite our CEO for Lafarge Africa, please, with your remarks. Khalid.
Thank you so much, Fola. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody, depending on the time difference. Her Excellency Princess Ajoke Orape Adifulere, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, represented today by Dr. Bala Yusuf Yunusa, Mrs. Bola Adisola, United Nations Global Compact, Vice Chair and Board Member and Senior Vice Chairman, Africa Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Andrew Ventier, Director, Institute of Sustainable Leadership, University of Cambridge, Mr. Marco Vandieri, Chief Development Officer, Global Reporting Initiative, valued stakeholders and partners from the private and public sector, gentlemen of the media. I'm most delighted to welcome you to the Lafarge Africa Thought Leaders Sustainability Series with the theme, The Decade of Action, Advancing the SDGs in a Post-Pandemic Era. This engagement was developed based on 3 prolonged foundations: a new way of thinking enforced by the ongoing global pandemic, the value that diverse stakeholder groups will bring on board to record commendable impact by 2030, and Lafarge Africa's commitment to sustainability. The Sustainability Series is a 4-week-long engagement which will focus on what we need to do collectively to achieve more measurable impact and accelerate the Sustainable Development Goals. It also affords an opportunity to share best practices for adoption in Nigeria and agree collectively how can we jointly progress the SDG from the Decade of Action. During this course, for which we are delighted to have global thought leaders share great insights, we will be discussing the role of environment and social governance, partnerships, corporate social investments, impact assessments, opportunities in circular economy and science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and their importance to nation building. The outcome of this engagement, which we hold every Wednesday through until September 9th, will accumulate in a national blueprint to be developed in partnership with the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs, and will be shared with all our valued stakeholders present here and beyond. As board members of the Private Sector Advisory Group founded by the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on SDGs and the Global Compact Nigeria Network, Lafarge Africa continues to strengthen its impact across various spheres of the human endeavor. I'm grateful to the thought leaders that we have here present. Your commitment and passion is recognized and appreciated. And to all present here today, I thank you once again. I look forward to a memorable engagement and very fruitful meetings today and beyond. Good afternoon, and back to you, Fola. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Khalid. And thank you once again to our esteemed chairman, who threw down the gauntlet immediately by declaring that we must ensure we have very robust deliberations. And to kick that off straight away, I'd like to put our poll just up on the screen, and we'll actually address and respond to that immediately. Dear participants, we have a very short interactive poll which will come up on your screen. Just asking you to respond to two very straightforward questions. If you can all please just respond. The intention is that this deliberation is interactive, and we would like to obviously get your input and understand your insights and perspectives hereon. So I'll just give you a few moments. As you can see, technology is instant, it's disruptive, and it certainly is a veritable tool for us to convey your perspectives. I think everybody is able to complete that. If there's any technical difficulties, that one of the other perils of technology is that there can be some snags, but our technical team have this all in hand. And obviously with INEC rules, hosts and panelists are unable to vote. Okay, thank you all very much. I think we should be able to have the results coming up on the screen. Interesting. Okay, so which of the following groups should complement government's efforts the most as drivers of the SDGs? We voted overwhelmingly, it should be a collaboration of all of the above. And by that, we mean the private sector, international agencies, and not-for-profit. So you've all spoken. Thank you. What SDGs should be the highest priority? And it's been an overwhelming vote here, quality education. And again, when you think about it, education is the foundation and bedrock of any country and any government. So thank you very much. That's been very clear, and we'll certainly try and weave that into discussions when we're having our thought leader deliberations. Thank you all very much. Thank you. And on that note, we'll move swiftly on and invite Dr. Bala Yusuf Yunusa, please, who is representing Her Excellency, to speak and deliver the keynote speech, please. Dr. Bala?
Okay. Thank you so much, Folashade. This of industry, this permit me to stand on the well-established protocol for this webinar as I deliver the text of Her Excellency, the Senior Special Assistant to the President of Sustainable Development Goals. And it goes, let me from the outset congratulate the management of Lafarge Africa for successfully organizing this maiden edition of this sustainability webinar series, despite the challenges of this time. The theme of this webinar, the decade of action, advancing the SDGs in the post-pandemic era, is suitable, timely, and a clear manifestation of your collective commitment to the achievement of the SDGs in Nigeria and Africa at large. Recall that in September 2015, world leaders met at the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development as a successor framework to the Millennium Development Goals. The Agenda for Sustainable Development envisions a present and a future that is economically sustainable, socially inclusive, and environmentally resilient. Addition is expressed through the framing of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, 169 targets, and 230 key performance indicators. Put it simply, the SDGs are a universal call to action to end extreme poverty, safeguard the planet, and ensure all people enjoy peace and prosperity by the year 2030. Certainly, the transformative promise to leave no one behind means prosperity for all, which means a society where David does not go to bed hungry, and Bala has access to quality education. A society where Rose feels confidence to take long walks in the early evenings, feeling safe, and where Ahmed does his business at any time of the day. In short, it means a society where people are empowered to achieve their full potentials. Following the adoption of the 2030 Agenda and the SDG, Nigeria acted very quickly in the overall implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Institutional frameworks have been established at national and at the subnational level, and considerable progress has been recorded. Between January 2016 to date, a number of strategic initiatives have been implemented in line with the first phase strategy of the implementation of the SDGs in Nigeria, and some are still ongoing. Some of these strategic initiatives I must highlight include the SDG data mapping and the publication of the SDG Indicator Baseline Report 2017, integration of the economic, social, environmental dimension of the SDGs into the Nigeria's economic recovery and growth plan ERGP 2017 to 2020, the domestication and customization of the Nigeria Integrated Sustainable Development Goal Simulation Model, which will guide our national and subnational development planning to be SDG based going forward. We've just commenced the design and implementation of integrated national financing framework for SDGs in Nigeria in line with the Addis Ababa Action Agenda for Financing Development. We are currently realigning the national statistical system with the requirements and indicators of the SDGs so that on an annual basis, Nigeria will be able to track progress or no progress in the overall achievement of the SDGs on an annual basis. We've just successfully presented the second voluntary national review to the high-level political forum on sustainable development goals. Distinguished participants, in theory, the decade of action means 10 more years of active implementation of the global goals by all stakeholders. It means 10 more years to cover grounds and achieve a transformative promise to leave no one behind by the year 2030. Unfortunately, just as we commence the decade of action for the SDGs in January 2020, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic across the world has now challenged the prospects of achieving the SDGs. Indeed, beyond the health hazards and human consequences of the pandemic, the socio-economic uncertainties and disruptions come at a substantial cost to the Nigerian economy, for example, which is largely dependent on oil and gas revenues. Evidently, COVID-19 has revealed the vulnerability of healthcare system in developing countries, Nigeria inclusive. Unfortunately, those who suffer the most are the poor and vulnerable women, children, people with disability, and older persons. Regrettably, it had to take COVID-19 outbreak to appreciate this, and we now have the responsibility to act quick, act strong, and act precise to attain the transformative change we all desire. It is said that critical times call for critical measures. This extraordinary moment requires that we all come together and find creative and innovative ways to build more equal, inclusive, and resilient society. We must urgently build back if we are to be on track to achieve the 2030 agenda by the 2030s. Evidently, one of the most effective ways to do this is by strengthening existing partnerships between the public and the private sector and other critical stakeholders. We have seen classical demonstration of these partnerships in the fight against COVID-19 in Nigeria. The Lafarge Africa Sustainability Series is in line with our idea of the private sector advisory group on SDGs, which is to create a strategic platform for galvanizing ideas, mobilizing expertise, and financial resources in support of the achievement of the SDGs in Nigeria. Financing sustainable development is not just about mobilizing capital for specific projects and programs. It's equally about ensuring the organized private sector becomes adapted to financing for sustainable development by altering the way in which private finance operates so that its own processes are both sustainable and support sustainability. As the Nigeria SDG Model 2019 report noted, funding remains a critical challenge to be overcome. As such, there is need to work in scaling up efforts to expand the fiscal space for SDG implementation in Nigeria. In this decade of action, there is need to look into ways of mobilizing additional resources and minimizing waste in the application of scarce public resources. There is need to do on the basis of public finance, public-private partnerships, impact investment, and strategic bonds as appropriate. It is pertinent to state that, as in similar contexts, funding alone is not sufficient to guarantee the attainment of the SDGs in Nigeria. The recent IMF report 2020 on SDG spending in Nigeria noted that beyond resources, improving coordination and strengthening governance is critical to delivering on the SDGs. Progress will require a whole of society approach supported by strong coordination between the federal, states, local governments, as well as the organized private sector. As carefully enumerated in the Nigeria's 2020 Voluntary National Review report, going forward in a post-COVID era, we need to judiciously use the realigned national statistical system, judiciously use the SDG model to develop the Nigeria's National Development Plan 2025 and the Nigeria Agenda 2050, the design and implementation of the integrated national financing framework for the SDGs. This will provide a snapshot of all existing and potential financing sources for the SDGs in Nigeria and unlock effective financing mechanisms to support the implementation of the SDGs. The state and non-state actors to cascade and strengthen advocacy for the SDGs across the 774 local governments in Nigeria, to effectively mobilize and engage all key segments of the society, the United Nations system, the diplomatic community, organized private sector, civil society, the academia, philanthropic foundations, and concerned citizens in a whole of society approach to achieve the SDGs. As we carefully deliberate in this sustainability series, please bear in mind that no single entity can do this alone. We need the expertise and financial resources of all, the public, the private sector, development partners, scientific community, and the wider civil society. It is only then that we can forge productive partnerships that can deliver the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Let me conclude by reaffirming Nigeria's commitment to the achievement of the SDGs in post-COVID era. Once again, I thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you a productive webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bala, for delivering Her Excellency Oreleokwe Adefulire's keynote speech. That was very thought-provoking, a direct call to action, and we commend her leadership. A lot of the comments you mentioned, we noted very diligently. You mentioned that there are 169 targets, 230 KPIs. SDGs is a universal call to action for us all. You also alluded to the impact. We just had that poll earlier. The quality education for all is fundamental and a critical strategic initiative. It's very encouraging to hear some of the progress that has been made. You mentioned that the SDG data mapping has been delivered and implemented. The International Economic Integration ERGP report, the domestication of the SDG models as well. It was very, very encouraging as well to hear that Nigeria is going to be tracking from a measurement and evaluation progress standpoint. Clearly, you alluded to the time, the 10 more years, critical more years, and the amount of grounds that we need to cover. It was interesting as well when you also alluded to COVID-19 and the impact. And for want of a better word, you revealed that the vulnerabilities it has actually started to, I suppose, create and reveal to us in Nigeria. And the fact that we must all stand strong together, we must be fast and really ensure that we work with all stakeholders to ensure that we achieve the decade of action successfully. It was interesting, and when we get to the panel, we'll certainly cover that. You alluded as well to the financing the SDGs and the fact that it actually does require us to alter the way we finance the institutions and finance operate, and how funding is very, very critical. And you closed by calling us all to action, by stating that we all need to judiciously leverage the SDG model and make sure that we bear in mind that no single entity can do this alone. We also thank you for acknowledging Lafarge as well. So thank you very much. And again, thank you ever so much. Please convey our esteemed regards to Her Excellency for a very, very insightful keynote speech. Thank you very much. So, as you heard our esteemed chairman mention earlier, this webinar series is the first of 4. So the topic of today, as I stated earlier, is environmental and social governance, a transformative approach towards achieving the SDGs. The past decade amplified the need for economic, environmental, and social governance. From 2010, ESG became a mantra for companies. In the middle of the decade, there has been a shift from conversations to environmental and social issues. Issues gaining significant momentum, particularly issues affecting consumers. The environment and the society at large has prompted this as a call to action for sustainable businesses. Examples are the Wells Fargo account fraud scandal that we all must have heard about a few years ago, and the recent concerns over data privacy by Facebook. Following the 2015 United Nations Convention on Climate Change, which we all know as COP21, major private participation in international climate dialogues has increased. The Paris Agreement has also boosted the ESG adoption. More recently, asset managers and asset owners have become signatories to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investments, otherwise known as PRI, focused on driving overall stakeholder value and corporate performance. ESG is beneficial to achieving the SDGs while addressing those critical global issues ranging from gas emissions to waste, water, land use, forest, biodiversity, economic development, health and wellness, workplace diversity, gender equality, transparency and responsible sourcing and procurement. As an organization, Lafarge Holcim has placed its sustainability ambition at the forefront to lead the industry in reducing carbon emissions and accelerating the transition towards low carbon construction to constantly introduce and promote high quality and sustainable building materials and solutions to customers worldwide. As the world begins to adapt to realities from COVID, as we heard in our keynote speak earlier, the focus on ESG in this decade will expectedly include good governance, ESG investing, diversity and inclusion, data and technology, and ESG engagements alike. The overall outcome is very clear: increased expectation for companies to improve disclosures relating to ESG. So as we progress in the decade of action, it has become an urgently important imperative for businesses to adopt a transformative approach to achieving the SDGs. And we are delighted to bring 3 formidable global thought leaders on board this afternoon to share with us their perspective on this very topic at hand. So it's indeed my great pleasure to welcome and read out the profiles of our 3 formidable thought leaders here today. I'd like to welcome once again and say good afternoon, Mrs. Bola Adeshola.
Thank you, Flashadi. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mrs. Bola Adeshola was confirmed by the Secretary General of the United Nations to serve as one of the vice chairs of the board of the United Nations Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. Mrs. Adeshola is also the Senior Vice Chairman of Africa of the Standard Chartered Bank Group. Mrs. Adeshola brings to the table a wealth of experience in the private sector, in the corporate sustainability arena, and specifically with the UNGC itself. She has served as the Chief Executive Officer and Managing Director of Standard Chartered Bank Nigeria Limited. Mrs. Adeshola has over 25 years banking experience and holds a law degree from the University of Buckingham. She also has an honorary fellow. She is also an honorary fellow of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, Nigeria, and sits on the board of the Financial Market Dealers Association, having served in various capacities in developing the Nigeria money market, the interbank settlement system, and the discount subsector. She chairs the Central Bank of Nigeria Bankers Subcommittee on Women Economic Empowerment. She is a member of the Nigerian National Competitiveness Council, inaugurated by the President in 2013, and was recently appointed the first female Vice President of the Lagos Business School Alumni Association. You're most welcome, ma'am, and please, we welcome our first formidable thought leader, Mrs. Bola Adeshola. And our second formidable thought leader that we have is Dr. Andrew Venter. Good afternoon, Dr. Venter. Dr. Venter is a director of the Cambridge. Thank you, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Andrew Venter is a director of the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, University of Cambridge. Prior to joining the University of Cambridge, he was the chief executive of the Wildlands Trust. Dr. Venter has a reputation for driving innovation in the sustainability sector, having led the development of a number of iconic environmental and social interventions, including Trees for Life, Recycling for Life, Food for Life, Kuthaza Business, the Wild Series, Greening Your Future, Adopt a River, the Kaluf Conservation Area Expansion. He holds a PhD in community-based conservation. You're most welcome once again, Dr. Venter.
Thank you very much.
And our third formidable thought leader is Marco van der Rie. Good afternoon, and most welcome.
Good afternoon, and thank you again.
Marco is the Chief Development Officer for the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. He moved to the GRI from his previous position as the Director of Business Development and Fundraising for the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, Climate Knowledge, Innovation and Community, EIT Climate KIC. That's abbreviated very well. He has more than 20 years experience with international organizations in partnership building and program management, fundraising and campaign delivery. Marco's past experience includes roles as a special advisor to the Collaborating Center on Sustainable Consumption and Production. Prior to that, he worked in various roles for the United Nations Volunteers, the UN Office for Project Services, and the UN Capital Development Fund. Marco is the founder of the consultancy firm Brokering Solidarity, who bring together organizations and communities to collaborate through sustainable development initiatives. During his career, he has worked globally and lived in the Netherlands, Germany, Spain, USA, Mozambique, and Brazil. I'm sure Nigeria must be next. Marco holds a master's in international relations from the University of Amsterdam with a focus on international environmental policy. Once again, you're most welcome, Marco. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And without further ado, I'd like to pose our first question, please, to Mrs. Adeshola. We have a number of questions for you, ma'am, but the first question, I'll ask two questions and move along in that order. The first question, Mrs. Adeshola, what critical acceleration actions for SDGs should be prioritized during and post-COVID as a nation, especially with the immense increase in poverty reduction, in education, inequality, and close to non-existent innovation?
Thank you very much, Folashade, and once again to yourself and Khalid, thank you for inviting me to this session, and well done with the work that Lafarge continues to do in this space, and congratulations to you as well, Fola, on your recent recognition in the sustainability space globally.
Thank you,
so, I think you had mentioned earlier about the fact that critical accelerations are needed for the delivery of the global goals of the 2030 ambition. And indeed, a lot of work has been done over the last couple of decades, but given recent interventions, the black swan of COVID being one of them, we have to really, focus on accelerating the actions and activities that we all, as businesses, as individuals, globally engage in order to ensure that we deliver the SDGs, and indeed as the most ambitious projects that humanity has ever embarked upon. It really is our best hope for tackling the challenges, particularly the really serious ones facing societies and our planet. I would say that as a foundational action, the first acceleration is mainstreaming the SDGs. I think in that regard, many societies and governments and countries have, not done so well. I'm glad that Dr. Bala mentioned some of the more recent achievements, along the lines of SDGs in Nigeria, and the integration of the SDGs into the latest sustainability plan that was chaired and led by the vice president, because it's got to be a collective national target that we focus on. The question relates to COVID and post-COVID, and the impact of COVID, I think, kind of amplified what we all know, and that's in relation to hunger and poverty, particularly in emerging markets. And we also saw that in Nigeria. In fact, the difficulty for people to comply with the lockdown rules was because they had to go out to earn a daily income, and they had to earn a living. But you can't sort of solve, or one cannot solve the hunger problem without addressing poverty. And one of the key ways of addressing poverty, again, is creating jobs so that people can earn a living, or enabling them to be self-employed to earn a living. And the topic of what critical acceleration actions can be taken, for example, in the area of poverty, are very broad-based. But I just want to look at it from the aspect of jobs. I know that many countries, including Nigeria, have interventions for businesses to help them. And I think that is one critical acceleration. How do we help businesses sustain, their operations? And as a result, how do we prevent job losses and also mitigate more people sliding into poverty? As we all know, for each employed person, and it varies per country, there are very many mouths that are fed. And this critical acceleration is obviously, SDG 3 represents that. SDG 3 actually is health. So health is also incidental to ensuring that people have jobs, because only healthy people can actually have jobs. So in supporting businesses to thrive, I think a critical intervention, which is already ongoing, but maybe needs to be a bit better coordinated and accelerated, is intervention funding and survival grants, okay? But you can't just throw money at everything. We've also got to look at capacity building and helping companies with potential pivots into appropriate business models that will feed the new normal. I think that's very, very important, and one that will help create a demand for the goods and services that they offer. In addition to supporting companies, I think we also need to critically intervene to drive new skills acquisition, skills that would be relevant for the present social and health crisis. One of the areas that I haven't heard much about is where now, even during COVID, there's a lot of push towards home care and self-care, even for people who contract COVID. And I think that driving, for example, healthcare training, auxiliary nurses, they don't have to be fully registered nurses, but can administer basic healthcare. Those are the kinds of interventions that would help, get people back to good health, for example, and such that they're able to then work. I think that in line with this as well is the fact that some of the interventions should be directed towards women. We all know that in our society, many women are the caregivers, they're the breadwinners, Statistics also indicate that the majority of small and micro businesses are actually run by women, run and owned by women. So interventions in this regard that are also simple and accessible, that's very important, accessible, will also help preserve families and alleviate poverty. I'll talk quickly on education and in innovation. COVID has seen a sort of, retrogression of, an already dire state of affairs in the educational sector in Nigeria. So I think that one of the critical areas that we need to look at to help get that back on stream, especially as remote and virtual learning is almost here to stay, is technology and internet penetration. I know some years back there were discussions around having internet access in all 774 local governments in Nigeria. I think it's a critical intervention that, working with the telcos and so on, we should look at. For the purpose of education as well, I think we need to focus quickly on teacher training, because our teachers are probably not equipped for now, and they're probably not fully equipped for post-COVID as well. When I spoke about technology now, the benefits are not just education, actually even health. So you have more telemedicine and so on and so forth. So the sort of multiplier effects of that particular intervention, would have much benefit in society. The last one I want to touch on is on innovation. Again, this is embedded in Goal 9. And, COVID has turned the world into a digital habitat virtually. And so any innovations in areas that will drive the SDGs are very, very critical. We need to look at how we can fund research. I think, I know that in Nigeria, there's already, I think the central bank, in fact, recently dedicated a sum towards research for COVID-19. But we've got to set very ambitious timelines for this. And the research really, should also look at areas that will have the most impact on society. So health, for example, food security. How can we, look at research, enhancing research into seeds and how they can generate more produce. Technology, and of course the environment. I think that's also very critical and should be prioritized. So, we all know this is a decade of action. We cannot, through incremental improvements on BAU, achieve the goals by 2030. And just to share also, the UNGC, for example, has a program called the SDG Young Innovators. That's along the lines of innovation, and it's part of what we have done as one of the interventions to try and drive innovation along the SDGs. And in June, they just had 80 SDG-based solutions from 480 participants that are going to be tried and tested. So, we just need to build back better, much more aggressively, and look at accelerating a lot of what we're doing right now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Adeshola. That was a very, very comprehensive and very, very pragmatic and very clear response with some critical innovations and actions that you mentioned. Mainstreaming the SDGs was one of the points you stated. Amplifying the impact of COVID and knowing jolly well what specific SDGs we need to focus on. You also went into not just stating what we need to do, but actually how we need to do it as well. So you talked about how it's important we focus on sustaining those critical businesses and ensuring that the critical intervention funding is actually available and fundamentally also sustainable. You also mentioned and commented about skills and making sure that the skills we have are relevant for now, and not just now, but for the future as well. I'm happy that you also spoke about women and the impact and importance women bring to the table and how they're also part of that ecosystem, for want of a better word. You talked about education, innovation as well. Alluding to the telcos, that's a very big industry, we all know. Ensuring that we're actually ensuring that our teachers are fit for purpose, for want of a better word, and making sure that they actually all have the tools. It was very encouraging to hear when you said that the CBN had allocated funds towards research, specifically the research that addresses education, that addresses poverty, and really will allow us to build back better. Thank you very much, Mrs. Adeshola. I'm going to ask you your next question, but I hope, okay, so I'm just going to allude to the next question. Incentives and direct private investments toward more sustainable operations, such as infrastructure, can endure for decades. So it goes without saying, direct such investments towards sustainable and socially responsible are very important. The private sector itself can also direct investments in more productive directions using the environmental, social, and governance standards, clearly aligned with the SDGs. While there is an interest in such transitions, it is not happening, and it's not happening rapidly enough. How can this be mitigated?
Thank you very much, Folashade. I mean, I would say that really the summary is, how do we drive or increase sustainable finance goals and targets, and how do we get companies also fit to attract investment as a result of the ESG banner. You know, in emerging markets alone, the UN estimates $3.9 trillion per year will be required for us to meet the 17 goals by 2030. And as it is now, at the current rate of investment, there's like the estimates of around $2.5 trillion gap in achieving that. The challenges are there, but I believe that the barriers are coming down, and there's sort of new thinking as to how the private sector can finance companies that are sustainably productive and also that are run responsibly. And, you know, ESG is very critical. The three factors of the environment, the social, and governance are important. Of course, there are transition risks with you know, with driving sustainable finance, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But you're asking about how can we mitigate this lack of you know, significant progress. I would say that as opposed to mitigants, I would say enablers, and I just want to touch on three that apply also directly to Nigeria. One is that companies probably don't fully appreciate the benefits of having ESG policies and being run responsibly. If a company is making profit, they don't understand that they can make profit and do good. The second thing is they don't realize soon enough that in not positioning their businesses as having sustainability embedded and driving the attainment of the SDGs, further down the line, they may constrain their ability to raise capital. So the importance of the messaging and communication to companies, I think, is very, very critical, particularly in our environment. The insufficient understanding is really a major contributor to the lack of rapid transition. The UNGC's 10 principles, for example, provide a principle-based approach to doing this. And we have already seen an uptick in companies that want to sign up to the compact and that require help in establishing, you know, ESG principles, ESG guidelines, and so on within their companies. And if you look at the 4 pillars of the Global Compact, human rights, labor, the environment, and anti-corruption, they capture really, you know, in any form or manner, what is a broad headline of ESG. So your question started off with that the government cannot deliver the global goals alone. And indeed, the private sector will play a significant role. The government will provide incentives. And I'll use Standard Chartered just for a minute or two as an example of how we have been able to drive our sustainable finance objectives. And it's something we take very, very seriously. For us, it's along 3 themes of being a responsible institution, managing the environmental and social governance risk, and of course, ensuring that we channel finance to impact communities and the environment. And we make public statements about this so that the companies that want the kind of funding that we have to give come to us, and we also are able to provide funding for them. So I think the combination of private sector and public sector incentives is what is really going to accelerate global goals. But I'll go into a bit more detail if we have time later on, because I can see you already saying that I've taken up more than 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Adeshola. And you're very clear. I like the fact that you gave, again, some very pragmatic actions, and you stated them as enablers, developing ESG policies, ensuring that we position sustainability in the business, and it does not, it is not a hindrance with regards to being able to raise funds. In fact, it's actually a benefit. You also mentioned about really a mindset shift in terms of trying to really, raise the understanding of, the ESGs. And you also stated and gave a good toolkit provided by the UNGC. And again, that was very, very clear. So thank you very much, Mrs. Adeshola.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, Marco. I just have a few questions for you too, please.
Yes, here.
I'll fire away.
Good, thank you.
What new strategies can company boards adopt to further entrench ESGs at the heart of its organization's objectives? In what ways can these be extended to the public sector as well for adoption?
Okay, good. Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for the invitation to be part of this this conversation today, and to note that Lafarge Holcim is a GRI community member and has been using the GRI standards for many years in its sustainability reporting. And as you mentioned at the beginning, having ambitious targets set out in your sustainability report, and now in an integrated report as well. So very much very important to see that is taking place at the global holding level, but also you're doing that at the Lafarge Africa level and working on sustainability report in GRI. And it's a pleasure that you're doing that. And we're already collaborating through our colleague Douglas Kativo, who's our director in Africa. The question on how to better integrate the ESG within the board of a company or within the work of a company. What we see, and a study was done last year with a number of companies in Brazil on the board level interaction on sustainability issues, which was very interesting to see, is that if you have a sustainability team, you have a sustainability director in a company, it is a step one. It's important, but it's much better even if that is then being represented at the executive level. And I see that 2 years ago, Lafarge Holcim appointed a chief sustainability officer at the holding level. So that person is then really integrating the thinking about sustainability across the entire company. But that's still not enough. We saw that it's important that in the board of the company, so both at the holding level as well as at the national level, it is important to have sustainability professionals, colleagues, part of that can be the anchor of the sustainability teams, of the sustainability directors within the company, can be their sounding board, and also can be the ones that hold the company as a whole responsible. And I think the work we saw out of the study is that when companies have that, when there is an anchor in the board or two anchors in the board that can focus on issues of sustainability, it will tremendously help the company to move forward in the area of sustainability. So that's the first key area that we saw out of it. A study that I encountered yesterday by chance on LinkedIn and came out in Bloomberg in June was to say that if you look at the investments being made in company, because of course all the investors and financial institutions review the ESG performance of companies much more than before, and we see a great movement specifically since the Climate Week last year. The study in Bloomberg said actually that there's still a very strong connection between fossil fuel emitter companies and boards of financial institutions. So how can the financial institutions that actually have no sustainability, no green, no environmental, no renewable energy knowledge within their board structures make the right decisions on the investments they make? And I was very much listening to Mr. Adeshola on what you're doing in Standard Chartered and how you define your investments, but having also like in the companies, in the boards of financial institutions, those representatives of sustainability, renewable energy, etc., represented, will help those boards to move forward much more. So we see that the integration of that is important. As we talked a lot about the SDGs, I was thinking back, and you mentioned that I was living in Mozambique, and that was in 2000. 2000 was the year that we started with the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, the precursor of the SDGs. And we had a decade of action, and we didn't achieve them by 2015, and we started the SDGs, and we have another decade of action now. So I really hope that we all, and I think that the comment of the audience today said we have to collaborate, all of us, is highly important to accelerate the SDGs. If we don't do it now, we will run into, as a global community, if we look at the SDGs as a systemic problem and we need to address them to have the transformation, if we don't do it now in the next decade, it would be very sad if we would have to come to 2030 and we say we're going to have another decade of action. No. I think we should have a decade where we can actually enjoy a much more sustainable global community and actually be together and work together and enjoy the sustainable planet that we are working for.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marco. That was very, very comprehensive. I think just to summarize your response to that is, and I'm happy that you actually acknowledge that Lafarge Holcim is very much leading by example, in the sense that at our global level, as you mentioned, it needs to be at the forefront. You stated that it needs to be at a global level. So we do have Magali Anderson, who is our Chief Sustainability Officer for Lafarge, and obviously myself here locally, and that's replicated across all our markets around the world globally. You also mentioned that it's important that the board, that person actually sits on the board, and that person also has, and we also integrate and leverage sustainability professionals, which is also a comment you mentioned. You also recommended that the board also focus on this as well by way of recommendations, for want of a better word, if I heard you right, that it would be of benefit to have a committee, a sustainability committee, that they focus on that. You also talked about a recent report. You basically, overall, what I heard you say is that integration is fundamentally important and that we all need to accelerate the SDGs collectively together. Thank you very much. I'm just conscious of time and I'm under pressure. So we're still going to come back because our intention is to go to the actual participants panel. And I would like to invite people, as I ask the next question, for you to start typing up your questions in the Q&A box. I already see that Dr. Bala has already started to answer some of them already. So thank you for that. That's going to save us a bit of time as well. So thank you. My very next question, and I please will ask you, Marco, please, if you could just be very succinct in your reply, please, for your next question. For organizations that have embraced ESGs, are there plans to amplify certain standards of GRI to strengthen the reported indices as may be required by the impact of COVID-19?
Good. Thank you. Yeah, well, I think we've seen, and all companies and all organizations globally are tremendously impacted by this pandemic. And it was already mentioned before that it is a crisis, and it has a huge impact on social relations, on employment, on health, on the economy. I think using this challenge, a global challenge, as an opportunity for us to understand what is happening is very important. I think what companies and governments start to realize, there are risks out there that are way beyond that we would expect, that have much larger impacts than we could even think of. And if we look at the global climate crisis and sustainability crisis, I think we can see that this is actually a wake-up call to see, okay, what is the next crisis actually gonna give us, and how can we be better prepared? And I think with the companies that are doing sustainability reporting already for many years, like you and also many others, I wish many more would do it immediately, and also even more with a more profound review, like of the multi-stakeholder analysis you need to do in order to be able to understand what is out there and what is your risk as a company. Not only what is the risk as a company internally, but also what is your impact on creating more risks as a company. So we see that in this double materiality perspective, as we have have in the GRI standards, that yes, there is a need for using them probably much better than they are. Looking at including new standards, etc. What I can say is we have a global sustainability standards board, which is the standard setter board, specifically looking at what are issues appearing at the global stage, how they can be integrated in the work plan of developing new standards. And we have already been developing a number of new standards recently, which was particularly focused on circular economy, which I know is of your interest very much as well, and waste. And another very important one that came out in December last year, which was the GRI 207 on tax transparency. And tax transparency is something that was controversial globally for a long time to make a standard about, but we were really asked and pushed to work on this issue. We saw that the investors are particularly interested in the tax standard because it's important for companies to be transparent about where income is being made and where tax is being paid. In the research, we saw that about $600 billion per year was evaded, which actually is income for governments that governments can use to actually implement all the activities necessary to achieve the SDGs. So we see that by asking for much more transparency around taxation at the global level, and we hope that the businesses will start doing this, governments will also have more resources available to actually achieve the SDGs. So the link is very clear. So I'm not saying we have a new review of standards because of COVID. There are many standards that are already looking at these issues. We have been giving a whole series of webinars about it and are continuing to do that. So I recommend anyone who's listening to look at our website and see if there's anything particular that's of your interest. There's webinars being given. You can still download them afterwards. But we see the importance of the interconnection of those standards. The last point I want to make is a program we have started last year, which is a sector program whereby we are particularly looking at high impact sectors and priority sectors around the world, and to say, okay, how can those sectors actually better use the GRI standards? There's more comparability across companies working in the same segment, and construction materials and construction and cement, of course, are key areas of work that the sector program will start looking at, and to see how, as a company, you can compare with your competitors worldwide and actually have a same level playing field in the sustainability reporting.
Thank you very much, Marco. That was very, very insightful. I'll just summarize as very quickly as I can. I like the fact that you said that it's important that we turn the global challenge into an opportunity. And there's much larger impact. You also mentioned the need for us to start to anticipate better and look at our material risks and really essentially ensure that we start to address them straight away. You also alluded to the fact that the GRI is already looking into this as your board from a sustainability standpoint. It was encouraging to hear that you're focusing on waste management. You talked about how certain unforeseen, or one could say unknown funding could potentially be realized through the tech, I think you said it was GRI 207, again, 207, I beg your pardon, and how that could be leveraged and utilized by the government for those critical research that's required. So thank you very much for your response to that question. Moving swiftly on, Dr. Andrew Venter. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. So your first question, please. Transformational partnerships for the SDGs delivers system shifts to move from an unsustainable system to a sustainable system. And just to be clear, unsustainable systems are economically, socially, and environmentally. How prepared are organizations, stakeholders, and the governments for such partnerships?
Thank you. So I think the honest answer to that is that they're not, and that we have some real challenges ahead. Just to put that in perspective, I think we are going into a period of deep change, from a societal structural change, and there's little doubt about that. Good reference for that will be what happened in the period between about 1910 and 1950, where there were a series of big disruptors, 2 world wars, recessions, pandemics, and flowing from that is the collapse of monarchy-led systems, evolution of democratic structures, and evolution of global alliances, UN and others. That was then followed by a period of relatively stable development, if you can call it that, but really underwritten by rapid economic growth, driven by fossil fuels and our ability to harness and drive those. What's happened in the last 10 years in particular has been growing anxiety as society has got its head around this challenge of global warming and the climate crisis, as we call it. That has now run into a pandemic, which has been predicted for years, but has hit us and has caught us all by surprise. So to the earlier point, we know this is coming, but we haven't prepared for it, and has been aggravated by a global recession on a scale that we have not been used to. So the question is, not only do we know we need to change our systems, so we know they're unsustainable, we know they need to change. We've done very little to prepare for that. We know that there are going to be fundamental shifts in our economies and societies, but we don't know what those are. What are the pieces we do know? So what we know is that any economy that is rooted on a fossil fuel platform is in trouble. In 20 years, there will be a significant drive and movement already well away from the concept of decarbonizing the economy. So we know that that's in the mix and is accelerating. We also know that any society, leaders of any society that are substantively unequal, which of course there are many, many of those around the world, and we've seen growing inequality, that leadership is vulnerable. Significantly vulnerable. The population growth, the combination of communication ability and a growing voice of the unequal society means that leadership in those sectors are very, very vulnerable and are likely to be changed. And then the third piece, of course, is that we know that there is a rapidly growing understanding that actually we need the natural environment, we need water, we need fresh air, we need grasslands, we need these systems. And we didn't really understand that, but we're starting to really understand that. And so any business that is in the business of selling products that are viewed to be unsustainable is going to be in trouble. So the highlights for us are we know that we are facing a decarbonized future. We are facing a future where there will be a drive for far more equal societies. And we are facing a future where we are going to be increasingly focused on less environmental destruction and more positive custodianship. Those are uncommon. There are very few boards around the world that understand that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Venter. I liked your very open, your very emphatic response. We're not prepared. It's as simple as that. And I'm very happy that you went into some detail. I'm very clear. You said the society is very anxious. You alluded to a lot of the challenges that we're facing. Disruption is abound. Evolution of global alliances is a good indicator. You also talked about the impacts of the climate crisis, also known as global warming, the pandemic, and compounded by a global recession. You also talked about inequality leadership countries, them being vulnerable due to their unequal society. And I like the fact that you closed by giving a way forward by saying that it's important that we move away from a decarbonized environment. So it was just very interesting to hear what you said, and thank you very much for that. Moving on to the next question, Dr. Venter. According to the World Economic Forum, approximately 350 million tons of plastics are produced annually, and more than half of that is dumped in either a landfill or the oceans every year. Plastics, whether soluble, disposable, or durable, cause pollution at almost every single stage of their life cycle. Starting with the use of fossil fuels, which you alluded to earlier in your answer, fossil fuels for their production. However, they are also essential for a cleaner and more sustainable future. Are there any practical applications and how this can be used positively for a sustainable environment and future?
Sure, thank you very much. Okay, so the starting point, we have become addicted to using plastic, and actually clearly 90% of the plastic we currently use is not recycled in any shape or form. That's a monster number. That means that the vast, vast majority is either going to landfill or ending up in the environment or being burnt. Now, in many ways, it's a fantastic proxy for some of the challenges we have and our opportunities to deal with it. So we now talk about plastic as being a problem, whereas 10 years ago we didn't, okay? So we've recognized it's a problem. We are desperately trying to figure out what to do with it. One of the key shifts there is we're going, wait a minute, here's an opportunity for a circular economy solution. So what does that mean? Is instead, so if we're going to use plastic, we must only use plastic that can be reused and reused and reused. So we are rapidly backtracking on a lot of the innovations in the plastic chain that were done over the last 20 years, which created more and more complex packaging. And we're working towards more and more simple packaging with single types of plastic in packaging that allows it to be recycled. Very interesting shift in how we do business. Then the other piece around that is we're starting to look at, if we're going to build circular economy models, what are these and sustainable and ethical, what do these supply chains look like? And so we're starting to see this idea that one, focus on creating local converter models. So lots of innovation in that space, pop-up entrepreneurs all over the place, all over the continent. There are entrepreneurs popping up with solutions to deal with plastic, from how to collect it, how to process it, how to convert it, and actually all increasingly being driven by the fact that it's seen as a problem, that it's seen as a resource, and that can be reused. So the answer to that is there are lots and lots of interesting solutions coming forward. And I think more importantly, if we look at the global challenges and the shift to sustainability, plastic is one of those learning interfaces where there are tons and tons of really interesting examples being generated for what new partnerships will look like.
Okay, thank you very much. And it was just interesting that you talked about the word and stated that 90% of plastics are not recyclable, but it was good as well that you also said that a key shift is that it's focusing now on a circular economy. And right now the world is more or less executing an emergent strategy. And when we say emergent, we are more or less saying that we're now reevaluating what current strategy we defined before and retro planning and making sure that we're making sure it's adapted to suit. And by that you talked about the supply chain models being evaluated and eco-entrepreneurs now being a really, really valuable resource. Thank you very much, Dr. Venter. And I'm sure our participants have a number of questions. So I'm actually going to open the floor and invite our participants. We have almost 100 or so of people. I'm going to read out the first question. And dear formidable thought leaders, please, you can state which question you would like to answer. So I have a first question here. It's from Eugene Itua. What is the role of the circular economy in all of these conversations? Dr. Venter, perhaps you'd like to answer that question. I think you already alluded to that earlier.
Yeah, so the evolution of the concept of a circular economy is fundamental to the change we're talking about, because what a circular economy simply says is that the minute that we take a resource, whether that be gold or oil or timber, we need to keep it in the system as long as possible. And so we shouldn't be single using and we shouldn't be disposing quickly. It almost takes us back 100 years ago where we cherished, you know, our grandmother's dining room table that was passed down to us because it was such a central piece of us, as opposed to going out and going, well, we don't like the look of it, so let's get a new one. And then today, 5 years later, getting another one. We're shifting back to this idea that we need to cherish the resources. So it does sit right at the heart of it. It is a distinct change in the economic model because most of our economics are founded on the idea of making money quickly by selling things repeatedly. So we built in redundancies. A simple example of that is a toaster. How many people have bought many, many toasters over the years? And the reason for that is that the toaster seems to have a life that extends one day past its warranty because it's in the interest of the toaster producer to sell more toasters. Whereas going forward, if you sell toasters, produce toasters today, you're going to have to figure out either how that toaster will survive for 20 years or how you will collect it in 2 years' time, break it down and use those parts to produce a new one. And that's going to change the design of the economy and basically reattach us to the value of the resources that we're using.
Maybe I can interject here quickly.
Yes, of course,
because I mentioned before, we just did a complete revision of the GRI 306, which is the waste standard, and incorporating the whole concept of circular economy within that. So any company using the GRI standard to report, you can look, or anyone who's interested can actually look and download at the standard itself to see not only how in-stream of materials and outstream goes, but also how actually your internal management processes need to be set in place, and you're thinking all the way from beginning, from design to the end of life within the material use. So I recommend to you to look at the standard, download it, and take a look, and come back with questions to us if you wish.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have another question here from Goyega Olorunfemi. In decarbonizing the planet, how rapid is the development outlook for Africa? What then will be the cost of this shift to African nations? And that's from Environment Global Resources.
Can I try that? Okay. Well, just as I think it was Mr. Benter who had said earlier that any country that is still focused on fossil fuels, is going to have major challenges over the next couple of decades, and decarbonization is the opposite of that. And if you look across Africa, yes, some countries have made the sound bites that they are focused on less carbon emissions, but I'm not really sure that giant strides have been made in that direction. Fossil fuels are still what is used to power most of, whether it's power plants, cars, and so on, the extractive industries, and not enough bold statements about what government policy will be along these lines. The second thing is that I think there's still insufficient financing for renewable energy across Africa. Standard Chartered, for example, had made a commitment to Power Africa a few years ago, a $1 billion commitment towards financing energy in Africa. But we also didn't see enough renewable energy transactions that were bankable. So even when there's financing, the structures, because of the regulatory and enabling environments, also do not support businesses along those lines. And I don't think that the laws in many of our countries across Africa are strong enough to sanction significant carbon emissions, companies that actually are not compliant. And on the other side of what some countries should be doing, including Nigeria, promoting water transportation where possible. That is alternative means of living and lifestyle that do not necessarily generate carbon. The second one is electric rail. I'm not sure the extent to which, even in Nigeria, with all the the progress we've made in providing rail transportation to complement road and air, that there's been enough focus on how we can have electric trains as opposed to the ones that are fueled by coal now and solar. So I think I can't put a number to what it would cost, but I think that if we begin to match what we say with action, we would find that even lifestyles, health, and so on would be much more would improve across Africa if the focus on decarbonization was there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mrs. Adeshola. I have another question, please, from Mrs. Onyinkon Adewale, our esteemed board member. Nigeria's unemployment rate was recently announced to be 27.1%. This is arguably the most troubling ticking time bomb. The Nigerian nation, this is arguably the most troubling ticking time bomb the Nigerian nation faces. Could Dr. Bala please shed some light on specific actions the SDG office is taking to tackle this problem, please? Dr. Bala?
Okay, thank you so much, Folashade. So the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President, popularly known as the SDG office, actually has the coordinating role. The ministries, department, and agencies of government are the ones responsible for implementing the SDGs. And that is the whole concept of the integration that we're talking about. And so we're aware that there are challenges related to poverty, unemployment. The 2020 Voluntary National Review adequately captured these challenges. And the next thing now is to see what are the sort of policy recommendations that we can take from that Voluntary National Review report to ensure the ministries, department, and agencies that have mandates for the attainment of these SDGs are working assiduously to ensure that we reduce unemployment. Obviously, some of these challenges are systemic. Our growth in Nigeria has never been inclusive until we aim and aspire to have an inclusive growth, that which provides economic opportunity for all the key segments of the society. We won't be able to reduce the level of unemployment in Nigeria. But the government is doing a lot with the National Social Investment Program, and obviously the massive investment that this administration is doing in the agricultural value chain. The Central Bank of Nigeria has a lot of simulation packages, including the Anchor Borrower Scheme. So we need to aim at these sectors that have major contribution to achieving inclusive growth. And then we are able to help reduce unemployment and poverty more broadly. But if we continue to concentrate on the growth that comes from mainly oil and gas, we will not have inclusive growth. And if we don't have inclusive growth, we won't be able to reduce poverty as well as unemployment. So the whole idea now is to broaden the economic base, massive investment in the agricultural value chain, where we are able to generate employment along that agricultural value chain, and also increase the level of our social investment. Nigeria has one of the largest social investment program on the continent. Now there is a full-fledged Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, driving that process to the institutional level that is required. So we need massive investment there, and then we also need to diversify the economy away from oil and gas, so that we achieve inclusive growth that can help us reduce poverty.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bala. Thank you very much. Thank you all participants. I can see a lot of questions are rolling in. We will try and make sure time is not, we do have a constraint of time, but I will try and make sure that those questions, we try our best to get responses and share and incorporate in the blueprint and roadmap we're putting together. I'd like to ask our final question to our formidable thought leaders, starting with Mrs. Adeshola, please. The Nigerian Stock Exchange, in partnership with the Professional Women Roundtable, recently published a top 20 scorecard on gender diversity. What recommendations would you make for organizations to bridge the gender gap and reduce inequality ahead of 2030?
Thanks very much, Folashade. I think, generally in Nigeria, there's a heightened awareness of the need for gender diversity and closing the gender gap. And a lot has been done to raise that awareness, but a lot still needs to be done to turn that awareness into actual action and impact. And so scorecards like the one you mentioned are very useful because they provide data that can be then be used for advocacy. And I mean, if our WIMBIS had produced a few like that in the past that we've used for advocacy for more women on boards, more women in the political space, and to help female-owned businesses scale up. I think one of the points to mention is that I think companies are now realizing, based on studies by the likes of McKinsey, PwC, IFC, and so on, that having diversity in management, in the workforce, and on boards actually is good business. And so that narrative is one which female or gender-oriented organizations continue to push, that it makes good sense. I mean, like the saying that you can't clap with one hand. And so it's important to have women there. And even for companies that don't really understand why diversity, and who are doing what I call sustainability washing, and they're just sort of ticking the boxes by having women on boards, it's fine, because that also is progress. I'm not sure yet whether Nigeria is ripe enough for legislation as exists in some countries where it's mandatory that there must be X number of women, on boards or in government. And even in financial services sector, it was through moral suasion that the target of 40% senior, females in management and 30% on boards was actually delivered to the banks. But the clincher there was, even though banks were a bit reluctant at the beginning, the requirement by the central bank for disclosure meant that you had to, because what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. You had to actually disclose in financial statement what the diversity is. But it's something which has to be intentional, whether it's in the private sector or even in government. And indeed, with government, the tone from the top, in the sense of government actually stating what the targets, what their targets are, just as in countries like Rwanda and many other countries, for gender diversity in the public sector. So in terms of recommendations, I can share some of what we do in Standard Chartered, for example, and I sit on our global diversity and inclusion board. So the key thing first is metrics. What are you measuring? Is it, male-female ratio, what sorts of roles, what female attrition, senior, junior, and so on and so forth. So in knowing where one is, targets are then set for what, the organization should try and achieve.
Thank you.
The second thing is specific measures in place to develop female talents, because the reason why I think this is sort of lopsided and is an issue, particularly in the corporate space, is because women tend to leave, and so that funnel kind of thins out as organizations move up. The third one is workplace practices that foster also more women staying in the workplace. So I mean, we in Standard Chartered, for example, we always have flexible working. So what we're doing now is not new to an organization like ours, but thankfully, being the new normal, it provides more opportunities for women to stay in the workforce and also to be productive. But as I said, government also has a role to play, and it has to be driven both by the private sector, the public sector. So in summary, I think metrics are important, awareness of the benefits of having more women in the workplace. It must be intentional. There should be support for women's networks, gender-oriented workplace practices, disclosure, and regulatory influence for industries that are regulated to try and help drive compliance in that regard. But that report was very good, and I think very timely as well.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Adeshola. I don't think there's any need for me to recap that. You were very, very clear and very specific. And I particularly liked your analogy when you say you cannot clap with one hand. So I think that encapsulates it very well. I also like the fact that you mentioned the key things we need to do better, which is legislation, also for the federal government to be very clear on what their position is from that standpoint and from a gender diversity standpoint. I'm very happy to say that Lafarge Africa was number 3 on that ranking in terms of gender diversity. So that was a very good one. Thank you very much, Mrs. Adeshola. Marco, my last question to you, please. Can you share insights into methods and processes for organizations to improve and measure their economic, social, and environmental performance and value creation using GRI as a reporting tool?
Well, that would be like another 2-hour conversation probably to go into. But what I would like to say is that as GRI, we collaborate with many different organizations that have developed many different tools with the Global Compact. We developed a whole alignment document on aligning the GRI standards with the SDGs. You can download them from the website. We work together with several other organizations on these kind of tools. We have a document that came just out last month, which is called Carrots and Sticks, which describes policies around ESG around the world. This is how governments deal with it, how regulators for capital markets deal with it, how stock exchanges deal with it. For example, we have an agreement with the Nigerian Stock Exchange and with the Africa Association of Stock Exchanges, and working across the continent to say, okay, what are rules and regulations that are being put in place in order for businesses to be more responsible. And what I wanted to say as well, what is a very strong development, which is also reflects back to some of the questions that I saw, is that in the European Union, with the Green Deal and with the whole COVID recovery, we can see that many governments and the European Union consistently keep on saying that the recovery should be green. And part of that green recovery, of course, is the businesses in Europe, and any business in the world that wants to collaborate or have commercial relationship with the European Union has to be engaged in this a greener recovery and within the Green Deal. And the Green Deal setting aside 2 trillion euros for the next 7 years, but that's probably not even enough. And one of an important element there as well is, and that is important for businesses not only in Europe but across the world to see, is that there's a directive on non-financial reporting from the European Union that's currently being revised and will probably be updated and upgraded, and probably move from what is sort of a relatively voluntary environment to a much more mandatory environment, where businesses, well, all of them will have to report on their impact across the ESG spectrum, and there have to be full sets of assurance mechanisms as well that all the reporting is correct, and therefore for any business to be prepared for that, I say would recommend to check out on our website. There's a lot of material there to be found. Check if you're in Africa, also with our regional office in Johannesburg through our director Douglas Kativu, to see if there's any courses, webinars, conversations going on in the region at the moment, and there's a whole series planned for the second half of the year. So I invite all of you to reach out to us and look into that, and then we can have that 2-hour conversation further down the line. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, Marco. And my last question to Dr. Venter from Dr. Ijeoma of the Lagos Business School. What would make businesses and governments take sustainability seriously? Considering fiscal pressures caused by COVID, has the pandemic negatively impacted efforts to advance ESGs and sustainability broadly?
Sure. Again, a big question. So I will come with my gut response to that. My gut response to that is that business and government are only going to take this seriously when society requires them to do it. And so as we see a COVID settling, and we see mobility in society again, we see gatherings again, we're seeing some of that around the world at the moment, unhappy people coming out and talking about why they do not like what business is doing or what government is doing. That is when we get a response. If we're honest about that, that is the key driver, whether that's a consumer behavior or just general society. Linked to that, though, is that it's not only about present, it is about the future voice coming through. And so as we've had a swell in our population structure around the youth element, that is coming through. We know in Africa, we deal with massive youth unemployment, which means in that sector, there's a lot of very unhappy people. And they are well informed. They might not be well educated, but they're well informed through digital platforms, access to social media. They are shaping their own perspective on what's required. And so I suspect that it is going to be a groundswell of societal response driving this, changing consumer demand, changing political demand, and a growing voice for something different. And then the governments, more importantly, the businesses that respond to that and respond in a way that they can go with the demand that society wants, are the ones that are going to become the new leaders. They're the ones that are going to be the shape changers and are going to sit in new economic trajectory.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Venter. We have several more questions, but one thing we don't have is time constraint. So what we will do, as we mentioned, this is the first in the four-part series. I will take these questions, and if you don't mind, our formidable thought leaders, perhaps I can share these questions with you, and perhaps during our next session, we can do our best to try and circulate that. Because as we mentioned, this is a collaborative effort from us all, and we really can't try and address all these questions in just the short 2 hours that we have. Before I close, I'd like to just invite Mrs. Adeshola, Marco, and Dr. Venter as well. Just 1 minute, please, with your just closing remarks and comments, please. Thank you.
Okay, shall I go first? Well,
Yes.
what I would like to say is to encourage the participants, particularly those who are business owners, to take the SDGs very seriously. I believe that it is the source of hope for humanity, for the planet, for lives, for livelihoods, and even for liberty. So it's important that we don't just see SDGs as something out there for others, but see how we can embed through the various means that we've discussed here today in our businesses, so that as we all make profit, we're also doing good for society. There's 17 SDGs, so there's enough on the menu for every business to pick one or more as a focus area. That's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ade. Thank you. Marco?
Well, thanks again for this opportunity. I think the SDGs give us an incredible framework to actually use it as a systemic piece and a global agenda to change our behaviors as people, as businesses, as governments. And as I said earlier, I wish indeed that this is the last decade of action, and the next one could actually be one where we can actually benefit from results. So we need to be more ambitious, we need to accelerate, we need to collaborate, and we need to innovate in order to achieve that. There's a lot of innovative work being done also in the area of your company in different ways, on climate innovation, on new materials, or on new types of energy, on circular economy. So I think we have to bring those set businesses together with innovative communities. We have to be transparent about what we do and how we drive the agendas, and get businesses and governments responsible and be transparent about those actions, so that we can actually all hold them accountable and find all the entry points for collaboration. So looking forward to see that happening.
Thank you very much, Marco. Dr. Venter?
Thank you very much. So I think my message would be that the SDGs are not only about the framework and the structure, there's a vision underlying those, and we need to embrace that vision. And that vision is a vision of change. It's a vision of doing things differently, and we need to recognize that. Linked to that, I think there's a real opportunity if we embrace that, particularly in an African context and a developing nation environment. If we embrace that, we can leapfrog. We should not be locked in the way we've been doing things. We need to be thinking about how we do things differently. And I'll just give you a simple example. Recently, the current CEO of Eskom, which I'm sure this audience will know, is a big South African electricity utility, and accounts by far for the largest CO2 footprint in Africa. And in a recent speech, and they've been in a lot of problems. So in a recent speech, he had a long speech about all the challenges they're having and all the work they're doing around fixing this coal station and that one and bringing things back onto track. It was this long process. Towards the end of the speech, there was one paragraph in a long speech. And what he said is, and Eskom have started seriously looking at alternative energy options because they've realized that it's very hard to secure financing for the existing operations, but there is financing available for alternative energy. And I smiled to myself. It was like, it's like, guys, is that not obvious that the world wants things done differently? So surely your speech should have been a long speech about your transformation strategy and how in 10 years' time you will be a very different business and how you've been able to leverage all of this financing across the world to do things differently, as opposed to getting lost in how hard it is to continue doing the same bad thing on and on.
Thank you very much. That was a very emphatic and insightful and call to action, closing remarks by formidable thought leaders. Thank you very much. Our chairman, when he declared the sustainability series open, charged us to have very important and impactful deliberations. Chairman, please, your comments.
I think it's been a very useful time, and Lafarge is proud and happy to continue to promote, stimulate, and participate in making the world a better place. I think it starts from capacity to think and to collate. When I was a graduate student in chemistry, this was 20-something odd years ago. This was 1995, so it's 30-something odd years, if I'm calculating correctly. We did environmental chemistry, and then we were taught that the ocean was an infinite diluter of anything. So plastics were just coming on board. And of course, science taught no matter the amount of thing you put in the ocean, there is no way it's going to get diluted infinitely. I think we know better. And since we know better, just like the company in South Africa, it's going to become increasingly not viable for businesses not to do the proper things. Because the more educated the world is, I mean, we are seated right here, I'm in Boston, some people are in Europe, some people are in Lagos, and we're actually able to exchange and educate ourselves. I think Lafarge is proud for the position government is taking in leading with the development goals. For Mrs. Adeshola, I think she's a perfect inclusion at the world stage to help in promoting better thinking, and Lafarge could not be prouder to continue to host this. I think the challenge is also on us to make sure that we're not also hosting, we are using the best of the thoughts. And I think Folashade has done a very good job at selecting people who really can contribute to this. So for me, it's an afternoon very well spent. And I thank everybody for their time. But I'm sure Khalid has proper closing words.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Khalid?
Thank you so much, Fola. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all the respectful speakers. It's been extremely informative, educative, different backgrounds, different approaches to the same problem with a focal single objective at the end of the day is how we come to make our Earth and planet better and more sustainable, more cleaner, and treasure the natural resources for many and many generations to come, and stop being selfish and really look for our children, grandchildren, and so many generations to come. And I think this is part of humanity and how human people should be thinking. I would take a few minutes to just link the dots because the speeches has been very, very insightful. The SDGs in itself is, and I fully agree with Marco that it designs an overarching agreement in areas where we can work, develop, and innovate, and Andrew has focused on the same area as well. I will bring the advocate hat here, is how can we commercialize these SDGs? How can we make them more attractive? And how can we bring it to the private sector and the institutions in a way that it's not only spending money in innovation, but rather than putting the money in a more sustainable SMEs, small and medium-sized organizations, a second layer in the economy that can take over the burden from the very few multinationals or corporates or NGOs, because no matter how big companies in terms of number are, they are not enough to serve the purpose. I think the spinal cord here per economy, and here let's talk about Nigeria as an example. You might end up with 10 big corporates in Nigeria and another 10 NGOs, and with the support of government and regulations. Is this enough steam to push the train forward? Or we need to create another layer which is the small to medium-sized organizations, supported by enough regulations, enough positive discrimination in the way we do business. So we are creating this mass push driven by not only the 10 big corporates or 15 big corporates, rather than having 1,000 SMEs who understands the culture, who can contribute to developing the system. So this is one of my pain points, that I think SDGs needs to be complemented somehow by being commercialized and positively discriminating. So I'm going to spend money, but how can I be positively discriminated compared to who does not spend money? And I think this makes the mindset things differently. And the other point is, I think sustainability requires consumer behavior as well. So it's not a one-end innovation and development, and again, big corporates driving the concept, rather than we have to work parallel with changing the consumer behavior. So how can we change the consumer behavior? How can we simplify the language of sustainability, circular energy, waste management, and all of these big tickets that we talk about within an environment of 100, 200 people? How can we address 2 million people? I believe addressing the 2-3 million people to make a change, we need to find a parallel language to what we are using, that we can address the mass population of the people and use them as a massive power for change as well. So this is my third point. My last point is, I believe that the partnership between, and I fully appreciate what Andrew said as well earlier, that we hope that we don't come after 10 years and say, okay, we need another 10 years, all right? But here, to make sure that we are not reaching this point, is what is the analysis that has been done? What are the root cause analysis that has been identified in the past 10, 15 years that makes us today asking for another 10 years? What did not work? Where did we miss the boat? Because if we are going to repeat the same initiatives, using the same language, addressing the same approach that we have done 15 years ago, then there is no doubt after 10 years, we're going to sit and ask for another 10 years. So part of maybe the coming webinars, coming sessions, and this would be my suggestion, that we need to spare some time to look backward and analyze what went wrong. We need to understand why we missed the boat in the last 15 years. So we are at least comfortable enough that we are not repeating the same mishaps or mistakes in the coming 10 years as well. And thank you so much. It's been greatly informative, very insightful, and I really look forward to the coming webinars.
Thank you very much, Khalid. And thank you all. This has indeed been an incredibly insightful and thought-provoking call to action, further deliberation, discussions webinar. So it's been very, very, very animated. On behalf of the chairman, the board, and the CEO of Lafarge Africa, we thank our esteemed keynote speaker, ably represented by Dr. Bala Yunusa. Our formidable thought leaders, thank you all very much. Distinguished participants, stakeholders, and our amazing planning team, because I think it would be a miss of me and also at Lafarge Africa not to mention the back-end work that went into preparing this. So again, a huge thank you to all of you as well, please. We look forward to the full integration of ESGs into business models. We look forward to you all joining us at our next session at the same time next week at 2 p.m. We have a very, very formidable thought leaders and a keynote speaker as well. I want to say thank you all very much and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Khalid.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Nice meeting you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bala. Thank you.
And Dr. Bala.